Hey, what's up my friends from Filomania? It's me again, back here with all my monsters, and when I say monsters, I'm talking about my obsessions, addictions, fears, and all those little demons that make me a bit crazy in the head. It's kind of an inside joke I repeat every time, but more than that, it's also a way of identifying with the knife community. Because let's face it, collectors like us are often misunderstood by the rest of the world. People don't always get why we chase down steals, finishes, or rare variants, but among us, this madness makes perfect sense. So today, we've got another unboxing. A fresh package just landed straight from the US, and this one's really special because it's a knife I've been chasing for quite a while. I actually scored it on eBay, and funny enough, not too long ago, I picked up the exact same model but in a different finish. I'll come back to that once I remember the exact name of that variant. Now, this piece comes from Maxace Knives, a Chinese company that's earned a reputation in the collector scene for their bold designs and use of exotic materials. This version sports a Mokume finish, which is basically a layered metal process that gives the scales that unique wood grain pattern a look that feels part Damascus, part organic flow. Later on, I'll show you its brother version so you can compare the two side by side. The eBay listing described this knife as brand new, never carried, and never cut. The seller looked like a small family-run shop, not entirely sure if they're directly tied to Maxace or just resellers. If anyone out there knows exactly who that family is, drop me a comment and let us know. All right, enough waiting, let's open this box and check it out. Now, let's see. Hold on. Damn, how do you even open this box? Do I have to tear it apart? Nah, that can't be it. Okay, there we go. Took the last 3 brain cells I had left, but I made it work. So let's check what's inside. This one says, "Thanks from NC Blade. Those guys always like to add a bit of humor." Silly, but it's a fun detail, and I always appreciate that. NC Blade is honestly one of the best suppliers out there, and they know how to take care of collectors. They even tossed in a band-aid with a little printed design, which cracks me up because it's like they know we're probably going to cut ourselves flipping or disassembling these things. Then we've got the certificate of authenticity, congratulating me on the new Maxace knife and listing all their socials. Inside the box, there isn't much else, just some filler cardboard, basically nothing worth noting. But here's what matters most, the goodies. Right up front, we've got some spare hardware, extra screws, most likely for the scales. And as any knife nut knows, that's a solid bonus because hardware tends to get chewed up or lost over time, and it's great to have replacements ready to go. Here, we've also got a stop pin, basically the little stopper that works with the frame lock. Along with that, some other small spare parts for maintenance, the usual stuff. And of course, the classic microfiber cloth to wipe the blade. Now, let's move on. The case they send is a nylon pouch, which does a really good job protecting the knife. And this right here, this is what I've been waiting on for a long time. Let me explain. I already own a similar knife, which I'll show you in just a second. It's the brother to this one. Both are from Maxace, both are Perseus models. The difference is in the materials. The one I've had in my collection for a while features Timascus inlays. You can see the tones of blue, gold, and red all mixed together. Timascus is a multi-layered titanium alloy. Imagine stacking sheets of titanium, forging them together into a single block, kind of like how Damascus steel is made. Then, when heat anodized, those layers produce those vivid blue and purple hues that collectors love. This new one, though, comes in Mokume. Mokume is also layered, but instead of titanium, it's made by fusing non-ferrous metals, typically copper, brass, and nickel-silver. Once forged into a solid billet, the surface is shaped or ground to reveal that flowing wood grain style pattern, just like Damascus, but with warmer, earthy tones. On this Perseus, the inlays are placed just like its brother, a bold, solid insert on the front scale, and on the back, a slimmer strip for balance. That symmetry is a nice design choice Maxace keeps consistent across the line. These inlays have very distinct grain lines and flowing patterns that make them incredibly attractive. The term Timascus itself was actually coined by 2 American craftsmen, Tom Ferry and Mike Norris, back in the early 2002. Their inspiration came from the look of Damascus steel, of course, but instead of using steel, They use titanium as the base. The result is a material that's much lighter, highly resistant to corrosion, and visually striking. And that's really the magic of Timascus. Not only is it strong and lightweight, but it's also stainless and doesn't react with the skin, so it won't trigger allergies. On top of that, it's purely decorative in the best sense. It looks badass, with those vibrant hues and organic patterns that knife collectors just can't resist. Now, the knife that arrived today, the Mokume edition, is built with a completely different type of material. As I mentioned earlier, it's the brother of my Timascus Perseus. The word Mokume literally translates from Japanese as wood grain metal. And here's the important part. Mokume is not actually a specific metal, but rather a forging technique. It's all about fusing together thin sheets of non-ferrous metals until they form a single billet. Once the billet is ground or carved, those layers reveal patterns that resemble the growth rings and veins you'd see in natural wood. In other words, the process is very similar to how Damascus steel is produced, except here you're working with different base metals. The most common ones used for Mokume are copper and brass, with brass itself being an alloy of copper and zinc. Together, these layers create a warm, organic pattern that contrasts beautifully with the futuristic vibe of Timascus. In higher-end versions of Mokume, the mix of metals can include bronze, nickel silver, and even sterling silver. On some luxury pieces, you'll even find gold or other precious metals blended into the billet. But in the case of this Maxace knife, what we usually see is a more standard combo: copper, nickel, silver, brass, and sometimes a touch of bronze. Now, looking at this specific inlay, I don't think it has a high concentration of bronze. Normally, bronze reacts with the acidity of your skin, the natural oils and sweat from your hand, and you'd see some patina or oxidation building up over time. But here, I haven't noticed any of that happening, which tells me the bronze content must be pretty low, maybe even negligible. My guess is this one leans more toward a mix of brass, nickel silver, and possibly a bit of steel. All right, let's not waste any more time, let's flip the blade open. And wow, this thing is gorgeous! The action is insanely smooth. I'd even say it feels snappier and more fluid than its brother, the one I've had for a few months now. If you've been following Filomania, you've probably seen the video I did on that Timascus version, but this one, straight out of the pouch, feels really well tuned. Let's check blade centering. Yep, dead on in the middle. Perfect. Of course, the sensation isn't brand new to me since I already own the other Perseus, but still, I love handling it. It's got excellent ergonomics, super comfortable in hand. These knives weigh in right around 4.5 ounces, give or take, which puts them right in that sweet spot for an EDC folder. You can carry it all day without feeling like you've got a brick in your pocket. Size-wise, they're very discreet. Not too big, not too small, just balanced. I don't have a ruler on me right now, but both versions should come in at roughly 15 centimeters closed length at most. And of course, the blade steel both are running solid stainless setups, giving you reliability for daily carry without the maintenance headaches of carbon steels. As you can probably already guess, the blade steel here is one of the highest grade, most advanced steels to hit the knife market in the last 3 or 4 years. It's top-tier stuff, outstanding corrosion resistance, crazy hardness, and overall just one of those steels that makes you feel like you're holding modern tech in your hand. Now, the blade profile is basically a drop point. You've got a clean, flat grind here, and from what I can see, the grind lines suggest it was machine done. It might have had some hand finishing touches, but you can clearly tell there's been some precision belt sanding with a super fine grit. That kind of finish is typical on production knives at this level. We've also got jimping along the spine, just like its brother. The blade stock thickness looks identical as well. There's a small machined relief cut near the spine, which is obviously part of the design aesthetic, but also serves a functional purpose. It reduces the thickness just enough to make piercing cuts easier. The thinner the stock at that point, the more controlled your punctures are, and that's something you definitely feel when putting it to work. One of the details I really like about this particular knife is its ergonomics. If you look closely, the blade actually sits slightly angled upward. The jimping almost guides your thumb into a position that tells you, this thing is pointing up. So even though it's a drop point, a profile that usually curves down toward the tip when you're pushing forward, the blade actually feels like it's lifting just a bit. That subtle geometry makes the knife feel more responsive and natural in hand, especially for precise cuts. I'd estimate the blade sits angled at about 5 to maybe 10 degrees upward. It's very subtle, super discreet, but once you notice it, you can really feel how it changes the ergonomics. Now, the pivot hardware looks to be made of zirconium, which gives it that elegant, almost luxury look. It's not just functional. Zirconium pivots have that dark, classy vibe that really sets a build apart. The screw head takes a Torx T6 driver, which is great because it's a tool you can easily find anywhere. No proprietary nonsense here, just standard hardware you can service yourself. Moving on to the clip. Both versions of this knife share the exact same pocket clip, but with what looks like a working finish, sort of a matte texture, with fine scratches and striations that give it character. It's non-reflective by design, which is what you want on a titanium clip. It won't catch light or scream for attention when it's riding in your pocket. Of course, both knives also share the same inlays that make them stand out, and one detail I find really interesting is this particular cut in the handle. I mentioned it back in the video I did on the Timascus version. To me, the machining here almost feels inspired by the body lines of a fish, the way the curves flow, the organic shaping. It's subtle, but it gives the knife a sense of movement and life, even when it's just sitting still. See these cuts here? To me, they look almost like gills, the gills of a shark or a fish, with 3 clean slits that resemble breathing vents. That's just my personal take, of course, but that's the impression I get every time I look at this handle. I get that some people might think I'm crazy for picking up what are essentially 2 of the same knife, with only a few differences in materials, and that's fair. But here's the thing, I'm not just buying cutting tools. These are collectible knives. They're functional, sure, but they're also art pieces, investments, objects that carry value beyond simple utility. One day, whether I decide to sell them myself or eventually pass them down to my kids, these knives will find a buyer in the market. And trust me, there's always a strong market out there for rare variants like these. Whoever sells them later could easily recoup the investment, and in most cases, even turn a profit. Think about it. I bought this knife in 2025, and let's say 20 years down the road, it gets sold. If it's been properly cared for, and I take care of mine in dedicated cases with humidity control, desiccant packs, and all that, it's going to look just as good as it does today. With that kind of preservation, the resale value won't just hold, it'll climb. These are the kinds of pieces that serious collectors look for, and that's why I see them as long-term assets, not just blades to flip open. All right, now let's shift gears and talk a little bit about the brand itself, Maxace Knives. This is a company that's been around for a handful of years, I'd say about 5 or 6 years in the market. They're based out of China, and while I don't have the exact release date of this Perseus variant, my best estimate would be sometime around 2023 or 2024. And I say that because these knives have already become pretty hard to track down. So yeah, the moment I saw it listed, I pulled the trigger right away because these are already discontinued. Both the Mokume version and the Timascus version are no longer in production. And honestly, out of the two, I've always had a soft spot for this collaboration in particular. All right, my friends, that's gonna do it for today's video. I know I went on for quite a while, but honestly, I couldn't help myself. I'm just really, really happy about finally scoring this piece. The Maxace Perseus with Mokume inlays. At this point, I can pretty much assure you this might be the very last one available on the market. I've been chasing it for over a year, constantly checking listings, and I even reached out directly to Maxace to ask about future runs. Their reply was clear. They had no plans to release this model again, which basically means it's discontinued. Now, maybe that could change, maybe it won't, but as of right now, August 2025, there's no new stock out there. The only way to find one is through the secondary market, what we call the second market, mostly places like eBay, where if you're lucky, you can still come across a new old stock piece, technically unused but sold by collectors. And that's exactly how I landed this one. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this unboxing. It turned into a longer episode than usual, but I had a blast sharing it with you, and I hope you had just as much fun watching. From me and from all of my monsters, my obsessions, my addictions, my fears, all that crazy crew that lives in my head, we wish you an amazing day, a great week ahead, and we'll see you in the next episode of Filomania. Thanks so much for watching, and until then, stay sharp.